Hello, dear listeners. Welcome back to the English Learning Podcast by English Finders. I'm your host, Emilia, and today we're diving into an exciting and modern way to learn a new language using Netflix. Yes, you heard that right. Whether you're binge-watching your favorite series or catching up on the latest movies, Netflix can actually be a powerful tool for improving your language skills. Today, I'm joined by our wonderful co-host, Liam. Hey, Liam, are you ready to help our listeners turn their Netflix time into productive language learning sessions?
Absolutely, Emilia. I can't wait to share some practical tips and tricks. I've personally used Netflix to help with language learning, and I'm excited to discuss how everyone can do the same.
That's awesome! So, in this episode, we'll explore how to choose the right content, the best ways to use subtitles, and how to balance enjoyment with education. We've also got an interactive Q&A segment where we'll be answering your questions about learning languages with Netflix. So stick around. It's going to be a fun and informative episode. All right, let's dive into the main topic, how to learn a language with Netflix. This is such a unique and enjoyable method, don't you think, Liam?
Definitely. Netflix offers a wide variety of content in different languages, and that variety is key to making language learning both fun and effective.
Absolutely. The first thing to consider is what you're watching. Not all content is created equal when it comes to language learning. So, Liam, what types of shows or movies would you recommend for someone starting out?
I'd say start with something that genuinely interests you. If you love crime dramas, go for that. If romantic comedies are more your style, choose those. The key is to stay engaged. Also, picking content that has clear dialogue and everyday language can be incredibly helpful, like sitcoms or family dramas.
That's a great point. It's easier to stick with language learning when you're enjoying the content. Now, let's talk about how to approach watching. We often hear about passive versus active learning. What's your take on this, Liam?
Active watching is where the magic happens. Passive watching, like having a show on in the background, is okay for exposure, but active watching is where you really focus on the dialogue, expressions, and even the cultural context. Pause, rewind, and rewatch scenes if you need to. The goal is to understand not just the words, but also how they're used in conversation.
Exactly. And subtitles play a huge role here. When you're just starting out, it's fine to use subtitles in your native language, but as you progress, switching to subtitles in the target language can be incredibly beneficial.
Yes, and eventually, try watching without any subtitles at all. It might be challenging at first, but it forces you to rely on your listening skills. You'll start picking up on patterns, phrases, and even slang.
And don't forget, Netflix has that nifty feature where you can slow down playback speed. It's perfect for those tricky sections where the characters are speaking too quickly.
Good tip! Now let's move on to one of my favorite parts, interacting with the content. Asking yourself questions like, what does this word mean? Or how would I use that phrase? Can deepen your understanding. You can even keep a notebook handy to jot down new words or expressions.
That's a great strategy, Liam. And speaking of questions, let's jump into our interactive Q&A segment. We've got some fantastic questions from our listeners about learning languages with Netflix. Ready?
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
Okay, our first question comes from Sarah, who asks, what should I do if I feel overwhelmed by the language while watching a show? That's a common concern, especially when starting out. What do you think, Liam?
I'd say, don't stress if you don't catch every word. Focus on the context, the actions, and the emotions of the characters. Sometimes, understanding the gist of the scene is more important than getting every single word. And remember, it's okay to rewatch episodes. Repetition is key to learning.
Exactly. And it's also okay to take breaks or switch to something simpler if you're feeling overwhelmed. It's all about building your confidence gradually. Our next question is from Pedro, who asks, is it better to watch content in a language I'm already somewhat familiar with, or should I challenge myself with something entirely new?
That's a great question, Pedro. If you're somewhat familiar with a language, watching content in that language can definitely reinforce what you know and help you build on it. But if you're up for a challenge, trying something new can be exciting and push your boundaries. It really depends on your goals. Are you looking for comfort or a challenge?
Well said, Liam. And remember, you can always switch it up. Watch something comfortable for a while, then dive into something more challenging. That balance can keep your learning experience both productive and enjoyable.
All right, that's all for our Q&A session today. Thanks so much to everyone who submitted questions. We hope you found these tips helpful and that you'll start using Netflix as a powerful language learning tool.
Now that we've discussed how to make the most out of Netflix for language learning, let's dive into a practical example. In this next segment, we're featuring a real-life dialogue between two friends, Sophie and Lucas. They'll be discussing a show they recently watched on Netflix in a foreign language.
That's right. Sophie and Lucas will show us how to use language learning content in a conversational setting. We'll listen in as they share their thoughts on the show, talk about new words or phrases they picked up, and how the show helped them with their language skills.
Hey Lucas, did you finish watching that new Spanish series on Netflix, La Casa de los Flores?
Hi Sophie. Yes, I did. I finished it last night. I have to say, I really enjoyed it. The humor was great, and the characters were so engaging. What about you?
I loved it too. I've been trying to improve my Spanish, and this show was perfect for that. I noticed that the characters use a lot of everyday language and slang, which is really helpful.
Absolutely. I learned some new phrases, like, "Que Leo," which means, what a mess. It was used a lot in the show. It's funny how you can pick up expressions and use them in real life.
Yes, and I also picked up "me muero de risa," which means I'm dying of laughter. I've already started using it with my friends. It's a fun way to make conversations more lively.
That's awesome. I also used the subtitles feature to help me understand the dialogue better. At first, I used English subtitles, but then I switched to Spanish ones. It really helped me connect the spoken words with their written form.
Good idea. I did the same. I found that switching to Spanish subtitles was really beneficial for improving my listening skills. It was a bit challenging at first, but it paid off.
Yeah, the challenge makes it more rewarding. I also think the cultural references in the show helped me understand the language better. For instance, there were several references to Mexican holidays and traditions that I wasn't familiar with.
Totally. Understanding cultural context is so important. It adds depth to the language learning process. I also like how the show uses humor. It makes learning new phrases more memorable.
Exactly. And I think we can both agree that watching shows in the target language makes the learning process more enjoyable. It's like having a fun language lesson that doesn't feel like studying.
Definitely. I'm already looking forward to starting another series. Maybe we can exchange recommendations?
Sounds like a plan. I'll send you a list of some great shows. And if you come across any good ones, let me know.
Will do. Thanks for chatting about this, Lucas. It's always great to discuss language learning strategies with you.
Likewise, Sophie. Happy watching.
All right, let's jump into our vocabulary breakdown for today's episode. We've got 5 keywords and phrases that came up during our discussion about learning a language with Netflix. These are really useful terms that you can apply in your own language learning journey.
Yeah, these words are super relevant if you're planning to use Netflix or any kind of video content to boost your language skills. Let's get started.
Okay, first up is subtitles. Subtitles are the text you see at the bottom of the screen that translate or transcribe the dialogue in a show or movie. They're really helpful when you're trying to understand what's being said, especially in a language you're still learning.
Right. And there are different ways to use them, like starting with subtitles in your native language, then switching to subtitles in the target language as you get more comfortable. For example, I watched the movie with English subtitles to understand the plot better.
Next is dubbed. When something is dubbed, it means that the original audio is replaced with audio in another language. So, if you're watching a French movie with English voices, that's a dubbed version.
Exactly. Dubbing can be useful if you want to focus more on visual content, or if you find subtitles distracting. But remember, if you're trying to learn the original language of the content, it's better to stick with the original audio. For example, I prefer to watch the series in its original language rather than the dubbed version.
Now let's talk about genre. A genre is a category of movies or shows that share similar characteristics, like action, romance, or comedy. Knowing your favorite genre can help you pick shows that you'll enjoy watching and learning from.
Exactly. If you like thrillers, watching those in your target language will keep you engaged and make the learning process more enjoyable. For example, my favorite genre is science fiction, so I always look for sci-fi shows in Spanish to practice.
Alright, this one's really important. Active watching. Active watching means you're fully engaged with what you're watching. You're not just passively letting the show run in the background. You're paying attention to the language, repeating phrases, and maybe even taking notes.
Yes. Active watching turns your viewing time into a productive learning session. It's a great way to catch new vocabulary and understand how the language is used in different contexts. For example, I always practice active watching when I'm learning a new language. It really helps me focus on the dialogue.
Last but not least, we have playback speed. This is the speed at which you watch your video content. Netflix lets you slow down or speed up the playback, which is super handy when you're learning a language.
Definitely. If a character is speaking too fast, you can slow down the playback speed to catch every word. It's a useful tool, especially when you're just starting out. For example, I slowed down the playback speed to understand the fast-talking characters in the show.
So there you have it. 5 keywords and phrases that will help you make the most out of your language learning with Netflix. Try using them next time you watch something in your target language.
Yeah, and remember, it's all about finding what works best for you. Experiment with subtitles, try active watching, and adjust the playback speed to suit your level.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. We hope you enjoyed learning about how to turn your Netflix time into a productive language learning experience. Remember, whether you're just starting out or already have some experience, there are so many ways to make your viewing time both fun and educational.
Absolutely. We covered some great tips today, from choosing the right content and using subtitles effectively, to practicing active watching and even adjusting the playback speed. And don't forget about the importance of interacting with the content, asking questions, taking notes, and discussing what you've watched with friends.
Exactly. And for those of you who joined us for the interactive Q&A, thanks for your great questions. We love hearing from our listeners and helping you out on your language learning journey.
Yes, thank you so much for your engagement. And if you have any more questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. We're always here to help.
That's right. So, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to English Finders, your favorite podcast platform. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating and leave a review. It really helps us reach more language learners like you.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep practicing, keep watching, and most importantly, keep having fun with your language learning.
Until next time, happy learning.
Goodbye.